Welcome, everyone. This should be an exciting evening with the Eat Smart, Live Longer Club, better known as ESLL, and our friends of ESL who are in attendance. Tonight, we have what I consider to be the leading edge of doctors in neurology and brain health research. I'd like you to know, though, one of the members of the team could not be with us because this was Dr. Dean Sherzai. He was called away to the hospital this afternoon. He may be able to join us during the presentation, but his wife, Dr. Ayesha Sherzai, will be doing the presentation for us. And as a matter of fact, she is located right there in the hospital, so her presentation will be done from there. They're a unique husband and wife team that are on the cutting edge of brain science. Dr. Dean and Dr. Ayesha Sherzai are dedicated to educating people on the simple steps to long-term health and wellness through their work as directors of the Alzheimer's Prevention Program at Loma Linda University Medical Center with their patients, as well as through their online writing, videos, and books. Their published book, The Alzheimer's Solution, according to T. Colin Campbell, co-author of the China study, is the best, most professionally informed book of its kind for this much feared disease. The protocol recommended by Drs. Dean and Ayesha Sherzai is a very important message to convey to the public, so please read that book. Soon to be released is a new book that they have coming out towards the end of March. Its title is The 30-Day Alzheimer's Solution. I hope that Ayesha will be able to briefly talk about it towards the end of her presentation this evening. Everyone will need to stick around to hear more about it later in the program. For everyone's edification, Team Sherzai is going to do, or Ayesha in this case, will do a slide presentation, and it will be followed by a brief Q&A session led by my co-host, Judy Cody. From their SherzaiMD.com website, they note that Alzheimer's disease is avoidable for the majority of people. The disease shows itself when people are in their 60s and 70s, but the process starts 25 years before that. The alarming numbers coming down with the disease is startling. We need to learn what we can now to prevent this disease to slow down. With no more waiting, let's get started. Welcome to the Eat Smart, Live Longer Club, Dr. Ayesha Sherzai. We're so happy to have you with us this evening.
Well, thank you so much, AJ. That was a very kind introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful, wonderful. Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all here. I can see some of my friends in the audience. I see Howard, I see Leslie, and I think I see Karen there as well. And if I can't see other friends, I'm sorry, but it's wonderful to be here. As some of you may know, we were there, I believe it was about 2 years ago. We visited you guys and we had a conversation and had a wonderful time. So it's wonderful to connect with you again. I'm very sorry that my husband, Dean, couldn't be here today. The plan was for both of us to be sitting here next to each other and presenting to you. But as you may know, California is in the midst of a near crisis regarding COVID. And so as physicians, we have been pulled to cover the hospital service inadvertently, letting go of some of the outpatient responsibilities. It's been a really difficult time for all of us, but it's also a privilege to be in this field and at this time and be of service to humanity. So apologies for my disheveled look. I tried to look really good for you guys, but I'm in my scrubs and I just got out of the ICU. I have a PowerPoint presentation for you, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about something that we're passionate about, which is brain health, and specifically cognitive health. Just a brief story. The reason we went into this field, and you probably, some of you may know, is because both Dean and I had two grandparents who suffered from dementia, specifically Alzheimer's disease. And they were one of the most brilliant people we know. These were the individuals who set us on this path of service and helping people and getting into medicine. and to see them slowly and gradually lose parts of themselves to the point where they couldn't remember the names of their children and grandchildren was devastating growing up. So we dedicated ourselves to learn more about the brain and see what we can do to essentially treat it. We got into the field thinking that we would have the resources and the tools to treat diseases like Alzheimer's disease and dementia. But in that journey, we found out about prevention. And I think Dean and I were probably the first people who coined the term preventive neurology. And so our work and our research is focused on identifying risk factors to prevent Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And with that, I'm just going to present some of the findings from our research and our life's mission. Okay, let me go ahead and start the PowerPoint presentation. You should be able to see the screen. AJ, can you see that? Can you give me a thumbs up? All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, so that's Dean and that's me. I'm sorry Dean is not here, but I'm going to take this time to talk about the profound impact of lifestyle on brain health and Alzheimer's prevention. I've been trained in neurology and preventive medicine, so I'm a neurologist, but I also have preventive medicine under my belt, which means that during my training, I actually worked in diabetes clinic, in smoking cessation clinics, and we learned more about the impact of lifestyle on general health. And Dean and I are both the directors of the Alzheimer's prevention program here at Loma Linda University. So the brain is an incredible organ. We say this sometimes, and our cardiologist and nephrologist friends don't really like it very much, but we believe the body is there to support the brain, and the brain is the most important organ in our body. And how could it not be? It is not just an organ, it is a manifestation of who we are. It's our memories, it's our language, it's our characters, it's our personalities. And it's an incredible organ. Roughly speaking, each brain is comprised of about 87 billion neurons or brain cells. So neurons are brain cells. And each one of them can make as little as 1 or 2 connections between each other, or as many as 30,000 connections. And that's the key to longevity and to brain health. We actually have control over building these connections throughout our life from age 2 to 200. I'm kind of stepping ahead of myself and giving it away, but the whole concept of neuroplasticity depends on this concept that we can make connections between brain cells, and it's such a dynamic process. The brain also is the most active organ in our body. At any given moment, it consumes 25% of our body's energy. So imagine the amount of energy that it takes. And so everything we do, whether it's the type of foods that we eat, or the kind of mental exercises that we adopt, or the kind of physical activities that we adopt, it affects our brain first and then the rest of the body. And somebody actually did the math, but we have about 1 quadrillion connections, which is just incredible. All right. But before we go and talk about the wonders of the brain and the incredible impact that we have on this amazing organ, I'm going to highlight some of the devastating diseases that we are all consumed by as a society. So dementia is a condition where people tend to have difficulties with their cognition to the point where they can't do their activities of daily living. So when people have dementia, they have difficulty driving, doing their finances, for example, or other activities in their daily life. And it is the most devastating disease of the 21st century. At any given moment, unfortunately, the numbers are scarier and scarier every year. Whenever we go to the Alzheimer's Association conference every year, these numbers increase. And unfortunately, every year for a talk, I have to change my slides and change the numbers. So every 64 seconds, somebody is diagnosed with dementia. And I use the word dementia and Alzheimer's interchangeably here. Dementia is the umbrella term. So it is like the word cancer. And Alzheimer's is the main type of dementia. Say, for example, like breast cancer. So it's a type of dementia. There are multiple different types of dementia. We have frontotemporal lobe dementia, Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's dementia, vascular dementia that comes about because of damage to the arteries in the brain, and I'll talk about that later. So Alzheimer's is the major type of dementia. Right now, there are 5.9 million people living with dementia in the United States. And we believe this is an understatement because in many communities, people don't get diagnosed because their families don't seek help. And it is assumed to be a part and parcel of getting old as aging. And that is a false concept. And hopefully we can change that. With your help, all of us need to speak about this. Old age is not synonymous with dementia. There is a correlation, but there's so much that one can do to prevent dementia. And it is the third leading cause of dementia in developed countries. In the UK and in Japan, they are #1. And if we don't do anything, it will soon become #1 in the United States as well. Sorry for all the bad news, but there's a lot of good news coming up as well. It is assumed that if we continue to live the way we do, and if our healthcare system does not change, by 2050, we will have 13.8 million people in the United States with Alzheimer's disease. And the cost is incredibly high. It is the leading cause of disability, and it is the most expensive disease in the country as well. And with current standards, we are looking at the cost of Alzheimer's being $1.1 trillion by 2050. 1 in 10 individuals age 65 and older have Alzheimer's disease here in the United States. And there are some gender disparity. As you can see in the slide, there's about 1 in 11 men who are suffering from Alzheimer's disease or who have the proclivity for developing Alzheimer's disease in their lifetime. It's 1 in 6 in women. And we're trying to understand that better. And it seems that pregnancy, the age of menstruation, age of menopause, and all of the hormonal changes that women go through puts them at a higher risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. We also think that the numbers that have come up to us are because when these numbers were assessed and the population that has dementia at this stage, they probably didn't have good preventive measures earlier, whether it was because of their hormonal risk factors or even lifestyle risk factors. So we are seeing a shift in this number, and hopefully we'll get new data that will show that women are not as high as this number is showing. I digress a little bit here, but that's one of the research topics that I'm working on. And I'm really excited about getting more information about what is the difference between a man and a woman's brain when it comes to proclivity for Alzheimer's or dementia in general. Right now in 2020, the total annual cost for caring for individuals living with Alzheimer's is about $305 billion, which is the most expensive disease. For heart disease, all of cardiovascular disease in total, it's about $110 billion. So you can see the discrepancy between the two. All right, so a couple of myths. Now it is assumed that Alzheimer's disease cannot be prevented, and that is so far from the truth, and that is the purpose of this talk. There's also a myth that Alzheimer's starts with symptoms of forgetfulness, which means that the minute or the day that people tend to start having some memory problems, that's when Alzheimer's starts, and that's not true. We've actually found that the pathology or the changes that occur in the brain, they start decades earlier, as early as 20 to 25 years earlier. And that also points to the fact that we can do so much about prevention of Alzheimer's disease at a younger age during our midlife. There's an assumption that there will be one medication to treat Alzheimer's disease, and we don't think that's true. Alzheimer's is not one disease. It's a culmination of multiple abnormal processes that puts people at a higher risk and push them off of the precipice where they manifest symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. Yes, we think there will be a treatment for Alzheimer's. Hopefully sometimes in the next 3 to 5 years, we will come up with a treatment, but it's not going to be one pill or one infusion. It will probably be a multifactorial treatment. And the last one, and I think the most important myth, is that Alzheimer's is a purely genetic disease, and that is not true. I'd like to expand on that. So the pathology or the changes for Alzheimer's disease that have been looked at and studied for decades, and this is where billions and billions of dollars were spent on research for Alzheimer's disease, were focused on these molecules or these changes. You probably must have heard about beta plaques or amyloid beta plaques or tau tangles. These are the pathologies and the changes inside the cell and outside the cell that one sees with autopsies of the brains. And NIH has spent so much money trying to get rid of this protein, damage it, zap it with laser beams, have it tested and treated with immunomodulating medication, but we haven't had a single successful study. There've been a lot of mouse studies and they've been successful, but when they translated that into human beings, it was always a failure. And the numbers are ridiculous. Having spent billions of dollars on more than 400 clinical trials, we have no treatment. 100% failure in all of these drug trials. Why? Well, many reasons. We've looked at the wrong model. We've started at the wrong age. We've only looked at mostly animal models. And Dean always says, mice does not men make. So we've been wrong in so many ways. And as a neurologist, when I was training to go into this field, it was such a pessimistic place to be at, where a family would be brought in and we would be standing there with our professors, evaluating them, spending a lot of money, thousands of dollars on MRIs, functional MRIs, CT scans, blood tests, neuropsychological testing. And at the end of the day, they would be given the bad news. And there were times when we would have a stack of brochures and say, no, I think you really need to look at a memory place or a facility for you to live in. And this is the time for you to help or get some help, make some really critical decisions about the rest of your life. So it was a dark, dark place. And because of this, because we never thought that we would have any treatment, and nobody really focused on prevention. So the myth that it is a purely genetic disease is false. Genes don't determine destiny. Genes do not, create the disease or the pathology of the disease. It just gives us the range of when the disease will manifest. It puts us at a risk, but it doesn't have to manifest. I like this slide, and I had to update it recently because we got some more information on it. So on the slide, you will see a bunch of different genetic factors. So on this axis, you'll see the risk for Alzheimer's disease. On the top, you have these three sets of genes that are called presenilin 1, presenilin 2, and APP, which stands for amyloid precursor protein. If one has these genes, they will develop Alzheimer's disease. It's just a matter of time, and they develop it at a very young age. And we've seen patients who are in their late 30s and 40s with the beginnings of Alzheimer's disease. But for the rest of the genes, they're not one single gene. There are genes that are responsible for cholesterol metabolism, genes that are responsible for glucose metabolism, for immune response, for getting rid of some of the garbage debris or the waste products that are created during this very active state of being. And it's a combination and activation of multiple of these genes that manifest in Alzheimer's disease. Some of you may have heard about ApoE4, and if you see in this screen, the big two orange circles, if one has one copy of the ApoE4 gene, our risk can go up to about 4 to 8 times. If one has 2 copies of the ApoE4 gene, then our risk can go up to 12 to 20 times. But again, about 50% of people who have a copy of the ApoE4 gene never develop Alzheimer's. So there's no direct causation for having the gene and the disease. Why? Because of the functions of these genes. As you can recall, like I said earlier, these genes are responsible for several different aspects of metabolism and brain function. So say, for example, the ApoE4 is responsible for cholesterol transport. If our cholesterol transport mechanism is overwhelmed, let's say, for example, somebody eats a lot of meat or they choose to eat a lot of processed foods, that system is going to be overwhelmed. What do you do about it? You don't overwhelm your system, and those genes will never get manifested. They will never get activated. And that's, it's a very simple way of putting it, but that's what we have learned. There are ways to deactivate these genes. There are ways to prolong or push back the manifestation of Alzheimer's disease, even if we have very, very high genetic risk. And what helps those things? Like I said, cholesterol metabolism, glucose metabolism, clearance of waste products, etc. Now let's look at some of the risk factors again. So again, it brings us back to the concept that prevention is of utmost importance, and prevention is the new treatment. We didn't go to the last year's Alzheimer's Association conference, but the year before that, in 2019, we were pleasantly surprised that at the beginning of the conference, where the plenary speech is given and all of the scientists and doctors are together, instead of focusing on some molecular research or some imaging research, which is the norm, the first and the foremost conversation was about the fact that prevention is the new treatment, that we all need to focus on it, because there was some amazing data coming from different universities just proving that. Now I'm going to show you one of them. So this was a study that was actually published in 2020, but presented in 2019 from Rush University in Chicago, where they collected data from a large population, and they looked at their genetic risk for dementia. And they found that if they had the genes for dementia, their risk of developing the disease would go up by 60%. However, if the same group of individuals had the genetic risk, but also had unhealthy lifestyle, they increased their risk by 360%. And if the same population with the genetic risk had a healthy lifestyle, they reduced their risk of developing dementia by 30%. That's the profound effect of genes and lifestyle, the relationship between genes and lifestyle on the manifestations of disease. And I thought that was probably one of the most empowering things that I've ever heard. So we've done research on this for many, many years, and it was so refreshing to see that finally the scientific community was coming to a consensus that prevention should be at the center of the conversation of managing this devastating disease. So adherence to a healthy lifestyle can offset genetic risk. All right. Now, in our book, The Alzheimer's Solution, we identified 4 risk factors based on our research and other fantastic scientific research coming from the world, that there were essentially 4 processes that were bringing about dementia. These are oxidation, inflammation, glucose or energy dysregulation, or lipid and fat dysregulation. And how do they come about? Not magical. Again, this has to do with our lifestyle. So oxidation can come about with poor diet, high sugar content, high saturated fat content in our diet. Inflammation can come from things like head injuries, alcohol abuse, smoking, glucose dysregulation, obviously because of poor diet and sedentary behavior. And the same goes for the lipid dysregulation, which is brought about by poorly managed cholesterol levels during midlife, diet, lack of exercise, et cetera, et cetera. And so how do we counteract that? We counteract that with lifestyle again, which is essentially nutrition, exercise, unwind or stress management, restorative sleep, and the 5th one is indirect, but optimization of cognitive activity. And we created a self-serving acronym for this, neuro, which I'll talk about. So the idea is that as we grow older, we don't necessarily have to have cognitive impairment. So there is a path as depicted by the red line where one starts having cognitive impairment, mild cognitive impairment, and that results into dementia as we grow older. But then there is a green line, which we would like to pursue, and we would like to actually disperse this information into different communities, that there is a way to maintain profoundly vibrant cognitive health as we grow older. And when you look at different studies, neuropsychologically, as far as memory scores are concerned, there are certain things that get worse. Say, for example, as we grow older, after age 20, our processing of information gets slower. So it takes about, a few milliseconds late for us to remember things or for us to process information. But as far as retention of information, our judgment, our executive function, all of that should improve if we give our brain the right kind of an environment for it to grow and thrive. So here's the acronym. The acronym is NEURO, N is for nutrition, E is for exercise, U is for unwind, R is for restorative sleep, not the kind of sleep where you take a sleeping pill and go to sleep, but the kind that allows you to go through the different stages. And O is for optimization of cognitive activity, which is keeping our minds active, which you guys are doing right now. So I'd like to take a few minutes. I'll be quite aware of how much time I have so I can have some time and converse with you all and take your questions if you have any. Let's talk about nutrition. And I can talk to you guys about nutrition all day long, and perhaps we can have a different day set up to dive deep into the different aspects of nutrition and brain health. So as far as data goes, as far as studies like the Mediterranean diet or the MIND diet or the DASH diet or the different dietary patterns that have been studied in different communities in different countries, the thing that stands out are unprocessed plant-based foods being incredibly important. So switching from a typical Western diet to a whole, which means unprocessed, plant-based, or at least plant predominant diet, if people don't want to go all the way plant-based, seems to be the best diet for brain health. And over again, when you look at different dietary patterns, say, for example, I do a lot of research on the Mediterranean diet, and there's a large population that I am involved with, the California Teacher Study, and my job is to look at elements of diet and which element stands out as far as its neuroprotective effect is concerned. And so we have charts where we can show dietary inflammatory indices, different foods that fall in that category. Again and again, what comes on top are things like greens, beans, blueberries or different berries, nuts and seeds, because they have no lower saturated fats and higher polyunsaturated fats and omega-3 fatty acids. Things like flax seeds and chia seeds and hemp seeds being such amazing resources of omega-3 fatty acids, which are important fats for the brain. And it's a reduction of things like meat, poultry, dairy, sources of saturated fats. So, and you see that pattern with whatever diet. I know that whenever you open up a magazine or an online service and you see this beautiful picture of a Mediterranean island with a lady sitting there listening to music, it's not about the place. It's not about the music, totally not about the wine and the pasta either. I promise you guys that. It's about the plant predominant aspect of their diet that is neuroprotective. All right. So here, the summary is whole food, plant-based is the most important diet for an optimal brain health. And I know nutrition is complicated and there is a diet war that is going on and I'm deep in it. Having taken the decision of being on social media and being figures and representatives of brain health, we get bombarded with questions and challenged with different ideologies and information out there. And so I'm in the midst of a fight between people who believe that carnivore diet is great or ketogenic diet is great, or you need to have fish for brain health, or for example, it's not too bad to have a little bit of coconut oil. So I'm aware of all of that. And this is just a summarized version of what we really see in our research and what we continue to see. And if things change, of course, we'll let you know. But it's incredible how things have been consistent. And if you look at cardiovascular health, for cancer, for other systems as well, the same thing is applied. So it's a whole food plant-based diet. It's elimination of meat and other sources of saturated fats, including poultry and dairy, and also refined carbohydrates. So white pasta, white bread, white flour, and just inclusion of whole foods. There are certain foods that stand out, although I'm not for reductionism. I don't believe in superfoods. I run away from superfoods, or when somebody mentions toxic foods and superfoods, there's no such thing. Food is food. There might be a good element and there might be a bad element into it. But there are certain foods that stand out and have been studied in large populations. Like, for example, in the Women's Health Initiative or the Nurses' Health Study, we've studied berries. Blueberries and strawberries seem to be incredible. And inclusion of half a cup of blueberries can significantly slow down decline in cognition, and it can improve brain health. And even they have magnetic resonance imaging studies showing people who eat a certain way have better looking brains. So berries, green leafy vegetables, because they're an incredible source of polyphenols, camphorol, lutein, and so many other anti-inflammatory products that are neuroprotective. They provide the building blocks for our brain to fight off inflammation. They don't activate those genes that I was talking earlier about. Beans, incredible source of fiber, incredible source of plant proteins, and resistant starches that keep our glucose metabolism steady so the brain doesn't get overwhelmed. And nuts and seeds, because they're great sources of plant fats. I didn't mention flax seeds and chia seeds, but those are amazing sources of alpha-linoleic acid, and that gets converted to EPA and DHA, which are omega-3 fatty acids that are incredibly important for the brain. So if we can consume them on a regular basis, that's incredibly important. So that was a summary of nutrition, believe it or not. Again, love to talk about it sometime in detail, but if we can all remember these important principles, I think we can have a wonderful, cognitively vibrant life. Right, so what happens, just to kind of go into a little bit of mechanism, we know that whole food plant-based diet prevents the neurodegenerative processes, and it also improves blood flow to the brain. So as far as neurovascular health is concerned, it improves the health of the endothelium in our brain vasculature. Saturated fats have been correlated with insulin resistance, which is a condition in our body and in the brain where the cells are unable to consume glucose as a source of energy. And it's slowly and gradually withers away. What happens is the doors of glucose receptors completely shut off if our system is overwhelmed with saturated fats, and that in turn can activate degenerative processes and inflammatory processes. And vitamins and nutrients are best derived from foods and not supplements. However, there's a caveat for that. There may be some individuals who can't absorb vitamins from food, and only under deficiency states it's important to take vitamins such as vitamin D or B12, especially if one is on a whole food plant-based diet. So focus should be on improving our dietary profile instead of chasing specific foods, and also acknowledging the fact that we may go down a rabbit hole of reductionism. So tending not to focus on nutrients, vitamins, and minerals, but on dietary patterns and just eating whole foods. All right, we're good on time. As far as exercise is concerned, we all know how important exercise is, but did you know that exercise essentially grows the brain? Now, there's been so many studies coming from incredible universities and incredible scientists looking at the different aspects of brain growth. When we exercise, two things happen. Our bodies start secreting essential growth hormones that create those connections between the brain cells that I mentioned earlier. Remember, the brain can make as little as 1 or 2 connections or as many as 30,000 connections. These growth hormones that are created in our body during exercise, they promote the growth of these connections. One of these hormones is called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and it can increase by about 30 times after even one session of a strenuous exercise. So making it a goal to exercise about 20 to 30 minutes every day is crucial. Well, at least 4 to 5 days a week. So regular moderate to strenuous activity is important. And I say moderate to strenuous because I have a lot of relatives who say, well, I walk all day long. I walk from my bedroom to my kitchen and from the kitchen to the garage and I'm good. And I'm like, no, that's not it. You really have to get tired and you have to set some time apart, just like you would for taking a shower and brushing your teeth, and exercise to the point where you break a sweat or you have difficulty completing a sentence. That's essentially a moderate to strenuous activity. But then also moving naturally during the day, not sitting on a chair for a long time like I am right now. Every hour having a reminder or a buzzer to make you stand up and walk around is incredibly important, because sedentary behavior nullifies the benefit of any exercise you do. Say, for example, you decided to exercise for 20 or 30 minutes, but then you sat down for about 3 to 4 hours behind a desk, nullified. So getting up, having a standing desk, or forcing yourself and arranging your lifestyle in a way where you're forced to get up and move naturally is important. And one last thing about exercise, we've noticed from studies that leg strength is associated with a bigger brain. Believe it or not. Who knew bigger legs would cause bigger brains? But it does. Apparently, we have the largest muscles in our legs. And when we exercise our legs, more BDNF is created, more connections are made, and the legs are the biggest pump in our bodies too. It's not the heart, it's our legs. So when we exercise our legs, say you did some lunges or some squats, or you're biking or you're walking, taking a brisk walk, your legs actually start pumping blood back up into the brain. And more perfusion, more vascular flow means more of the debris gotten out and more precious oxygen given to those susceptible areas of the brain, especially the hippocampus. So there are these two little areas called the hippocampi on both sides. And these are responsible for encoding memory. And when we exercise our legs, the hippocampi get more blood, they get more BDNF, and there have been studies that have shown that the hippocampi size actually grow when one exercises. And that happens at any age. And the studies that have shown that to us have been done in individuals who are 55 and above. So I think that's a very empowering message. So that's how important exercise is. I bet you all have to stand up and exercise right after this talk. Please do that. That's important. You've been sitting for a while now. All right, stress. Let's talk about stress. We've all been through a lot of stress. This whole year has been probably one of the most stressful times in our lives, and we've seen people go through different stages of stress. And this is an area that Dean is actually studying very, very closely, and there's been a lot of information coming to us. So when one says stress, the word stress, it gives you a picture of something really bad. But did you know that there is actually something as good stress? So good stress is the type of stress that you own, that you brought it on yourself, and that has an end, that it's quantified. It's something like, a course that you take, or for example, a task that you take on, a project you take on at work. It's maybe a new language that you're learning, or a new instrument that you're learning. What that does is that it boosts new cell connections. It sharpens your memory. It speeds your learning process, and it creates a brain bank account or cognitive reserve. More connections. And that is one of the most important things in our lives that we need to bring on. Letting go of bad stress and increasing our good stress should be the focus. And bad stress, obviously, is the kind of stress that is not yours, that has no end to it, that is not stuck to a timeline, and that was imposed on you. And what that does is it damages your brain cells. It can impair your motivation. It truly impairs learning. And that's why when we're under a lot of stress, we're very forgetful. We can't focus on anything. And focus is the gateway to memory. If you can't focus on something, if you can't pay attention to something because you're always preoccupied by something else, forget about learning it. And you're never able to attend to it or retain it. And your brain is never able to process that information and put it in the right file, folder, cabinet. for you to remember later on. Easier said than done. And I think my friend Howard would agree, and he's actually spoken about this a lot. Reducing your bad stress requires many different ways of doing so, and perhaps we can spend some time and talk about that. But the most important first step is to identify what is a good stress and what is a bad stress. And that separation of good stress and bad stress can help you quantify it, can help you have more control over it, and have you increase it, the good stress, and delegate or decrease the bad stress as much as possible. So perception is the first step. And I encourage you all to take some time to separate the good stresses and bad stresses in your life. And if you come to our house, we have whiteboards all over the place, and we've written down our bad stresses and our good stresses, and that helps us stay organized. For example, one of the stresses in my life, that I thought was, well, job, I'm overwhelmed, everything is vague, but it wasn't just the job. I love my job. I love taking care of patients. It was a particular aspect of my job. For example, driving to my job. Hate it, still hate it. It's the worst stress in my life. But now I know it, and now I have, essentially calcified that, and I separate it from all the wonderful things that happen during my work, and I have some measure of control over that. So I invite you to think about the separation of good and bad stress, because it's very important for brain health. Sleep, cute baby. Who sleeps like that anymore? No one, but I just love this picture. Sleep is incredibly important. For a long time, we completely ignored the importance of sleep. And as a physician, there was a time when we would take pride in sleeping for 3 hours and just being quote unquote sharp the next day, which is a lie, the biggest lie ever. Nobody's sharp after 3 hours of sleep. And even people who say, I'm so used to sleeping for 4 hours, I'm okay with that. No, it doesn't. We need more sleep. Typically, a human being, an adult human being, needs about 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And we know that sleep has two major functions in the brain. The first thing it does is it cleanses the brain. So it gets rid of all the debris. There's a function in our brain that gets activated when we go through the deeper stages of sleep, the Glymphatic System. And what it does, it's like a vacuum cleaner. It's like a group of janitors entering a building when nobody's around, and they start cleaning the rooms. That's exactly what happens when we're in deep sleep. This system gets activated. But guess what? If we're not sleeping, or if we're waking up too many times, our brain doesn't have the opportunity to go through these stages of deeper restorative sleep sessions, and the Glymphatic System never gets activated. And so what happens is there is accumulation of debris in the brain. And these debris, namely beta amyloid being one of them, they've been detected. So they've done studies on people who sleep well and who don't sleep well, or the same individual who slept well one night and then slept really badly the next night. When they did cerebrospinal fluid analysis, getting it from their spinal cord, from the vertebral column, and when they looked at beta amyloid, it was higher in individuals who didn't get a good night's sleep, which meant it never got cleared away. And it was lower in people who got a good sleep. So even one night of bad sleep can affect the levels of these harmful proteins in our cerebrospinal fluid. So it's important to get a deep restorative sleep. The second thing that happens in our sleep is our memories are organized, they're consolidating during different stages of sleep. So we essentially have 3 stages of sleep: stage 1, 2, 3, and then we have REM, which is rapid eye movement. During stages 2 and 3, which are the deeper stages of sleep, it's also called a slow wave sleep, our memories are essentially placed in the right file. It's like when you acquire information during the day, it's written on scribbles, it's written on these little paper notes or sticky notes. When you sleep, this gets written in a beautiful way in a Word document, and this Word document gets stored in the right file, folder, cabinet on your computer. So the next time when you're thinking of a particular information, you know where it is, because there it is. You've labeled it. It's right there in that folder, and you know where to get it. But if you don't sleep, it stays in these sticky notes all over your brain, and guess what? It's going to be unorganized, and you're going to forget about it really quickly. So that's a good analogy, simply said, but that's a really good analogy of what actually happens when we sleep. And so if somebody has sleep disorders like sleep apnea or restless leg syndrome, or they have a bladder condition where they wake up over and over again, it doesn't let them go through the deeper stages of sleep. And so their memories are not consolidated. So getting yourself checked, making sure you don't have sleep apnea, if you feel tired in the morning, or you have a headache, or if you snore, if your partner snores a lot, or you hear them gasping for air when they're sleeping, they need to get themselves checked, because that could be a risk for Alzheimer's. There was a study in Florida that showed that people who have untreated sleep apnea have a 70% higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Can you believe that? And that's a very easily preventable and treating condition with a CPAP machine. Same goes for restless leg syndrome. So that's the importance of sleep. All right, optimize. Optimize essentially points to the importance of being cognitively active, or optimization of cognitive activity. Now, people who are always challenging themselves with complex activities, people who don't necessarily retire, or they're always learning new information, or they're involved with their community in different projects, they have cognitive reserve. One of the fun studies was the London taxi and bus driver studies, where they compared taxi drivers. And for those of you who've been to London, I kind of put a little, small little map there. It's no New York or Chicago where you have your, intuitive street numbers and a map. It's just a mesh of different streets. Due respect to anyone from London, but it's just confusing. And so the London taxi drivers, I'm not sure if they still do, but they had to go through this test called the knowledge, where they had to memorize all these street names and the home numbers, which is incredible. And it would take a very long time. So they had to go through this test, and there was a few % of people who actually passed, and they were all accomplished adults. And so they compared these taxi drivers that had to memorize such an incredible amount of information with people who were bus drivers who had a very assigned route, and they really didn't have to memorize anything. And they found out that people who had to memorize, the taxi drivers, had a larger hippocampus, which is a part of the brain that is involved in memory, because of this complexity of their daily activities. And so they had bigger, more resilient brains. It was a fun study, and you guys can actually Google this and read about it. It's an incredible study. Another study that was incredibly interesting was the Nun Study. So these incredible nuns dedicated their bodies and their brains to science. And what the scientists did in the University of Minnesota was to look at their autobiographies, 60 years worth of autobiographies, what they had written, what kind of lifestyles they had. And when these nuns passed away and their brains were autopsied, their writings were correlated with their brain findings. And the nuns who had high linguistic abilities, who had very active lives, they did not show any evidence of Alzheimer's, despite having the pathology or the lesions of Alzheimer's in their brains. And the other nuns, who relatively had a good-looking brain with less Alzheimer's-like pathology, they probably had developed Alzheimer's, and when they looked at their writings, they didn't have as high a linguistic ability, which also points to the importance of being cognitively active, not necessarily with just linguistics, but involving yourself with something complex and challenging for your life. So whether it's a new language or a new instrument or a project or gardening or taking care of this fantastic group that I'm speaking with right now, forcing yourself to learn something to cook, taking a cooking class, all of these translate to cognitive reserve. It's like having money in your bank for that rainy day. And so, for example, if someone came in, and we use education as a proxy for cognitive activity in multiple studies, but it doesn't necessarily have to be education. It's not the number of years you spend in college or in school. It's how active you are for the rest of your life. So it's important to keep engaged. And and we've seen that when people who have high cognitive reserve, if they have, say, for example, a small stroke, or if they have a head injury, the chances of this converting into something more ominous is very low, because they already have that brain bank account and that reserve. So as you can see, optimal cognitive activity involves complexity of activities. It also involves challenge. So say, for example, if something is complex, after a while, you're not going to be challenged anymore because it becomes easy. So challenging yourself, pushing yourself to that next step, taking on something new is important. Say, for example, you knew 3 or 4 recipes. Now it's time for you to learn 7 recipes. Or if you know 5 steps of a dance, you got to learn all 8. So that's the challenge. And it has to be connected with purpose. It sounds like a soft concept, but I think it's the most important element of everything that I've just said right now. If a task or an activity is not connected to your purpose in life, if it doesn't have a direction or a vector, if it's not connected to a mission in life, it's meaningless and you probably won't even continue that. So something that is deep and meaningful, that gives you joy and purpose and anchors you into this life, is what's going to keep you moving forward. And it's important for your activities to come from there. Okay. All right. So we believe that change at the individual and community level is key for Alzheimer's disease. The reason I'm sitting here in front of you from my clinic in Loma Linda is because, I wish Dean was here, is because we believe that for a long time, the concept of brain health and Alzheimer's disease was only discussed in the echo chambers of scientists and neurologists who were essentially just speaking to themselves. But it's important for us to know that there is so much we can do as a community. And you, all of you, are brain health ambassadors dispersing this information out there, that there is so much we can do about this devastating disease, that there's so much we can prevent, that we don't have to suffer, that our loved ones don't have to suffer. Yes, there may be some people who may have the genetic risks for it, but they're so small that that percentage is very, very small. Only about 3% of Alzheimer's disease is heavily driven by genes, and whatever we do, we probably won't be able to change it. But more than 90% of it can be prevented. And that's what we mentioned in our book, The Alzheimer's Solution. And that is what our focus has been, and that is what we are doing in different communities. Our Healthy Minds Initiative is one of the aspects of our research. It's a community-based study in multiple areas. And we're looking at the concept that chronic diseases of aging, especially brain diseases, can be averted and can be prevented with lifestyle. Our flagship research is at Beach Cities Health District, which is in Hermosa, Manhattan, and Redondo Beach in Southern California. And we have other community-based initiatives, including in Hilton Health. The one in Beach Cities is doing very, very well. We're looking at the relationship of lifestyle and cognitive health in 500 participants. It's a 3-year study where we ask individuals to get MRIs, we test their cognition, we look at their blood-brain biomarkers, and we get a lot of lifestyle questionnaires, and we put them through an intensive lifestyle study, and we implement the neuro plan, which is whole food plant-based lifestyle, helping them create their own exercise plan, helping them assess their good and bad stresses, help them if they have any issues with their sleep, and also optimization of their cognitive activity. That's our fantastic team at Beach Cities. This was our book. Some of you may know, we wrote The Alzheimer's Solution in 2017. It was a bestseller in its category, and I'm so proud of it because it's our work, our life's work. I remember when we actually first wrote this book, the reference section was about, like a good 60 pages, and the publisher says, no, you have an eye measure. If somebody sees that the book is too thick, they're probably not going to buy it. And the reason I'm saying this is because it's evidence-based. We made sure that it's based on the science, and I'm happy to say that even in 2021, the science has stayed steady, and of course we've updated that. Today I'm really honored and proud, and I think this is the first time that I'm actually announcing it on a talk, that our new book, The 30-Day Alzheimer's Solution, is coming out on the 23rd of March. It is a companion to the Alzheimer's Solution with an amazing focus on food and specifically lifestyle as well. So it's essentially the how of the Alzheimer's Solution. In the Alzheimer's Solution, we went deep into the science and we showed the evidence, but in the Alzheimer's Solution, a 30-Day Alzheimer's Solution, we are focusing more on the how and what needs to be done. And we're working with our publishers, and we've created a campaign where people who pre-order the book are going to be selected to a closed Facebook and an online group, not necessarily Facebook if some people don't want to be on Facebook, but it's an online group where they can interact with us for 30 days. And we thought it would be wonderful to go through the 30 days together, where we can cook together, we can have conversations, you can have access to us live, have conversations, questions that may be answered. We have a fantastic team of nutritionists, exercise specialists who are going to moderate some of the questions and discussions. And it's going to be a fantastic 30 days, and people will continue to be in that group if they would like. And the focus will be to add to the conversation of prevention of cognitive decline. And I want to make sure, I want to say something here. A lot of people say reversal of Alzheimer's disease, and I want to make sure that that's impossible. If somebody has Alzheimer's disease, there's no way that one can reverse it. And it is a huge disrespect to a lot of people who are suffering from Alzheimer's disease. We don't have any objective evidence of reversing Alzheimer's disease, but there's a lot of research and objective evidence that cognitive decline before it reaches Alzheimer's disease can be reversed as well. So that's what we're focusing on. My favorite part is coming next. So as some of you may know, I'm a chef. I trained at Columbia University for vascular neurology and epidemiology. I'm actually getting my master's in nutritional epidemiology. And so when I was a fellow, I was so affected by our insouciance to lifestyle and prevention that I decided to go to cooking school. Yes, medication are important, but food is important too. So I went to cooking school, the Natural Gourmet Institute, in 2 years. I got my degree for culinary arts. I would be in the ICU in my scrubs in the morning, and I'd be cutting potatoes and onions at night in the cooking school. So I created all these recipes, and we chose this fantastic frozen banana and cashews and blueberry ice cream cake on top because we wanted to say, yeah, eating healthy doesn't necessarily mean deprivation. And so the next part is, well, these are just some of the pages from the book. We have incredible recipes, about 79 of them, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and smoothie bowls, and incredible burgers and bowls. And look at that beautiful thing. So that's just a page from the book. Grilled sweet potatoes with tempeh, with kale, broccoli, avocados, and some barley on top. That's the omega fat muffins with hemp and oatmeal and sweetened with dates. Obviously, there are no processed sugars in any of the recipes, and everything is saturated fat free. That's the spicy cabbage and brown rice bowl, which is one of my favorite foods on earth. Those are the amazing energy truffles with cocoa nibs and sesame seeds. Our website is teamsherzai.com. If you'd like more recipes, information about the book and of course the recipes, you can go to teamsherzai.com and you can sign up for the newsletters so that we could inform you when the book is coming out, and more information on the 30-day group that you could join us in. Thank you so much for your time. I will stop sharing my screen now and give an opportunity for Judy and AJ to take over, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, Judy, go ahead and start with the question, Q&A part of it.
Okay, Dr. Ayesha, thank you so much for your talk. And I also want to thank the members for sending so many questions. And I'm just going to jump right in right now.
Absolutely.
The first question is, what is your opinion of a person taking the cognition-enhancing drugs donepezil, memantine, and sertraline, and having them all prescribed at the same time?
And having, I'm sorry, what was the last part? And having them what?
All prescribed at the same time, taking them
Having
all
them
together.
all prescribed at the same time. Okay, so these medications, memantine, donepezil, and there's a patch, an Exelon patch too, that comes along with that group. These are not disease-modifying medications, so they really don't do anything to the beta amyloid protein deposition in the brain. These are all symptom-relieving medication. It's like, it's not like antibiotics that get rid of bacteria. It's essentially like aspirin that just gets rid of the pain and doesn't really do anything to the structure of the disease itself. So unfortunately, these medications only have a very temporary role, and about 6 months to about 18 months, they're rendered ineffective. And if somebody needs them, they can be very effective. They can increase motivation. They can reduce this, the symptoms of cognitive decline. And there are medications that we do use for people who have cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease.
So there's really no drug that can loosen up some of the tangles, the protein tangles that are in our brain once Alzheimer's disease is evidenced? Or,
unfortunately, no. Yes,
and
that's correct.
And not even nutrition, no matter, it's once it's there, it's there. Is that correct?
So we both, so the theory is we keep on building these harmful proteins in our body and our brains all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And of course it gets worse and worse as we age. But if we optimize our brain health in a way where we provide the right environment with the right food, if we exercise, if we sleep well, if we keep our bad stresses at bay, then these bad proteins are going to get cleared away faster, and they won't be created as much. That's the theory behind good brain health. So yes, there are ways to prevent it from happening, and there are ways to get rid of it faster, and that's lifestyle.
So once it's happened, though, if you go into a good lifestyle, a preventative lifestyle, you can arrest the progression of the disease. Is that what I hear?
Yes. So people can have cognitive decline starting at age 20,
right,
where your memory and retention of information slows down slowly and gradually. However, the process where there is irreversible damage to the brain, that happens, and that's when the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease starts. So there's normal brain, and then there is cognitive decline. There is mild cognitive impairment, or MCI, which is the pre-Alzheimer's state. And then there is mild Alzheimer's, moderate Alzheimer's, and then severe Alzheimer's. We know that mild cognitive impairment can be reversed. Cognitive decline before that can be reversed. Does that make sense? And
yes,
even people who have mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease, they can slow down the progression of the disease with a healthy lifestyle. But it's important for us not to use the word reverse once Alzheimer's has started, because we don't have any objective evidence for that. I hope that was helpful.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to mention to you that we have an ESSO book club. And back in September of last year, we read The Alzheimer's Solution.
Amazing.
A group of us.
Amazing.
We enjoyed it tremendously.
Thank you.
So I'll go on to another question. How often do you see Alzheimer's misdiagnosed as a serious vitamin B12 deficiency?
Infrequently.
Yeah.
Infrequently now, thankfully, because over years we have found, we have agreed on a particular set of workups whenever someone has cognitive impairment. And so that's something that can be ruled out at the early stages. Very rarely. I can remember only one case, someone coming from the community where they had very poor relationship with their primary care physician. Supposedly he was not very nice. And so that person just stopped seeing his primary care physician. And when he came to my clinic, he had incredibly low vitamin B12. And when we started it, he got better. So it's not very frequent.
Okay.
But it is a very important factor for brain health. So optimizing vitamin B12 is very important.
Definitely. All right. Thank you. We'll go on to another pillar that we probably touched on a little bit, but what is your opinion regarding meditation for people with, say, ADD or ADHD and anxiety? How would that fit in to help someone with the beginnings of AD or any kind of dementia?
And meditation is incredibly important. And we do have studies from different universities, UCLA, one of them, where they saw that people who meditated on a regular basis, they actually had thicker cortices. So a thicker cortex, which is the gray matter layer of the brain, which is responsible for communication and production of different thought processes and action. What meditation does is it strengthens the part of the brain that helps us with focus. And focus is so important for retention of memory. When we are able to meditate, we strengthen our brain to quiet it down, to get rid of all the noise in the background, and to be able to attend to something and not be distracted too much. Distraction is a huge issue. So yes, meditation is very helpful, and I'm glad that we have evidence for that.
Mm-hmm. Now here's one. A member asks, what is your opinion regarding the link between alcohol consumption and dementia or Alzheimer's disease?
Right, that's a
I know
that's
it's
a good question,
I don't
right?
think we want to hear the question, the answer, really.
Thanks, Judy. No, but I always give Dean this question. I want him to take it.
Sorry.
So much right now. No, I'm kidding. But so there's a lot of controversy about alcohol, and you can see multiple articles coming out saying a glass or two of wine is actually great for you. You know, and
Yeah.
especially when you look at the Blue Zones concept, and Blue Zones concept says, you know, wine after 5 is very good. And when you look at people who live in areas where they are the longest living population, they drink alcohol. But when you look at molecular studies and basic science research, alcohol is neurotoxic.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's what you
Yeah.
find in Windex. Would you want Windex sprayed on something that has fat, you know? So it's a little complex than that. So I'm sorry if for the scientists out there, or for me simplifying this much, but what alcohol does, we know that people who drink alcohol on a regular basis, more than what they should, they actually have smaller brains. There's a particular part of the brain that shrinks. The cerebellum and the parietal lobes, they shrink. And we also know that alcohol can damage brain blood vessels, which are important for providing oxygen and nutrition for the brain. So from the latest studies, we know that alcohol is associated with higher risk of dementia, is associated with higher risk of stroke. And some of the studies that actually show benefits of alcohol, that may be because of the conviviality that alcohol brings. People drink together, or they drink to calm themselves down. So maybe anxiety was the reason why they're not actually seeing the bad effects of the disease. But if we can get rid of anxiety with something else other than alcohol, then I think that would be appropriate. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but yeah, I have yet to see the benefits of alcohol for brain health.
Yeah, maybe if you wanted a glass once a month, then you had to jump on your bicycle and every day and strengthen up those leg muscles.
You know, a glass once in a while, if people really enjoy their wine, is not going to harm them. But I always say, if you never have drunk alcohol in the past, you don't need to start it for good brain.
Right. That's right. Well, let's go on to something different now. In your first book, you said somewhere that low blood pressure has been linked to Alzheimer's disease. Is that true? And someone said, how low is low?
I don't recall I said low blood pressure. I may have said high blood pressure. We all know that high blood pressure can cause damage to the smaller blood vessels in the brain. So our brain is the most vascular organ in the body. And if you line all the blood vessels together, and somebody did this calculation, which is incredible, it would span 400 miles. So we have 400 miles worth of arteries in our brain. Low blood pressure can only cause cognitive impairment in the situation where somebody already has damage to their arteries. Atherosclerosis is the term used for it, which means thinning of the arteries, or plaque deposition in the arteries to the point where they get really, really small. And so you need higher blood pressure to perfuse the brain. And that happens in people who have had unmanaged blood pressure for a long time, or unmanaged diabetes for a very long time. And we see that in the hospital all the time when they come in with a stroke or with a little bit of confusion, and we see their neck arteries, the carotid arteries, very, very thin and small. And so what happens is they're not getting enough blood. So what we do is we take away their blood pressures and let their blood pressure rise. But for general community and general population, the lower the blood pressure, the better.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. Here's a different kind of a question. Would you comment on melatonin as a sleep aid for someone who is unable to fall asleep or stay asleep? Mm-hmm. Also, are there any problems with long-term use of melatonin in relation to brain health?
Mm-hmm. Melatonin is one of the least offensive medication for our brain health. It's great at a 5 milligram and can really help individuals fall asleep without much side effect. There are few people who tend to have hallucinations with melatonin, and it has to do with how their bodies metabolize melatonin. And we've also seen some patients who have the beginnings of Alzheimer's disease develop a lot of hallucinations or bad dreams with melatonin. So it's harmless, and we have yet to see any long-term harmful consequences. But you know, one of the best things to increase melatonin in your body is having a brisk walk outside or getting some sunlight outside first thing in the morning. You actually prepare yourself to sleep well at night by exposing your eyes to sunshine first thing in the morning, because the pineal gland, that's where the melatonin is actually secreted and created in our brains. It starts activating and getting prepared for bedtime first thing in the morning. And so that's why sleep hygiene is so important. Going to bed at the same time, waking at the same time, not taking too much naps, making sure that we get daylight, making sure we get some exercise first thing in the morning. You remember how people get really tired when they go to the beach? You know, even if you don't do anything and if you're exposed to the sun. Why is that? It's because our bodies actually start making a lot of melatonin. So you know, getting it in a natural way is much better, but if people want to take melatonin to help them sleep, that should be okay.
All right, thank you for that answer. Another one that I've heard so many times before, do activities like crossword puzzles and computer games, do they help prevent or delay the onset of AD? Or do you need something that's more rigorous?
Yes. It does. We actually have a study that shows that, you know, a goofy Atari kind of a brain game on computer could delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease by, I believe it was 7 to 8 years. Don't quote me on this, but it's, you know, close to a decade. So yes, those the brain activities work. However, those only activate specific domains of cognition. So for example, Dean hates Sudoku. Some of you might know it. We probably wrote it in the book too. But you know, if you do Sudoku, which is just math, it only activates the part of the brain that is responsible for math. Or if you do puzzles, it only activates the part of the brain that looks at pattern recognition or visual spatial. But if you do something complex like learning piano or singing, it's your memory, it's your emotions, it's your rhythm, it's your executive function, it's your calculation, it's all of these domains getting activity. That's why complex cognitive activities are so much more important. And people who involve themselves in more complex things do better.
Okay, understandable. Thank you. We're on. Let's see. This is a question from a member. We know food choices, exercise, social interaction, and purpose impact how the brain functions. Would you be able to provide any input on hearing loss and how it may impact the brain performance and quality of life?
Right, absolutely. Hearing loss is a very important risk factor for the development of dementia. And it's because of several reasons. Well, first, probably related to the neurodegeneration in some people, degeneration of the nerve and brain together. But more importantly, it has to do with just being cut off. You know, the brain is very hungry for information, for being stimulated all the time. And if someone has hearing issues or if they refuse to wear their hearing aids, which I encounter all the time because it's uncomfortable, they don't like it, they don't like the sound, what happens is that background noise, even if they're not really listening to something, their background noise is reduced significantly. And that just stops the brain from paying attention and being active. Even background noise keeps our brains active. And so it's the constant engagement with your environment that pushes your brain to grow and function and process information all the time. So yes, it's really important to get treated for it or at least evaluated for it if there is a fear of risk.
Okay, we have another one. Have there ever been studies done comparing different eating plans, such as Mediterranean diet or a whole food plant-based diet or a vegan diet? And which one would be best for brain health?
Like I said earlier, the Mediterranean diet has been studied the most. Mind diet is a hybrid of the Mediterranean diet and DASH diet, dietary approach to stop hypertension. And those dietary patterns emphasize plant-based foods and reduction of meats, poultry, and dairy. And Mind Diet has poultry included in it, but the person who created the Mind Diet, Martha Claire Morris, who passed away recently, unfortunately, she said they put it there just because people like eating chicken. But when you look at the dietary pattern, the things that stand out are beans, greens, whole grains, nuts, seeds, berries. Those are the important things. And so even though if we don't really title it as a plant-based or vegan or whole food, when you look at the analysis and the way these diets are scored, it's the plant components that stand out.
Right, correct.
And that's the basis of our message. It's whole food plant-based.
Right. Someone asked, Dr. Ayesha, your children are exceptionally brilliant. They've already written 2 books. Alex and Sophie are on the internet. I just watched, their hour video myself. What do you attribute this to? Just your passion and they're just living with you?
Their dad.
Their dad. How about the nutrition when you were pregnant? Were you were you plant-based then? And was there a difference between births of children?
Yes. So Dean and I, so for you guys to know, Dean and I went plant-based. We met about close to 17 or 18 years now. We went plant-based for ethical reasons and for just knowing that, a plant-based diet can reduce the risk of disease. And we started talking about our grandparents. So we both went plant-based, but we weren't entirely plant-based. We were vegetarian. So we did eat some eggs and maybe a little bit of cheese here and there. But then when we had our kids, we were both vegetarian. So they've never had any meat. And they never had any dairy. Perhaps some, their grandma would hide some eggs into their diet once in a while. But they have been whole food plant-based. My son is 15 and my daughter is 13. They've been whole food plant-based for about 8 years now. And honestly, never really had any challenge about their growth. Of course, a lot of resistance from their pediatrician, where they put vegans as one of their problem lists. It's like, how can vegans be a problem list? No health issues, vegans. But they've been thriving, and of course we pay a lot of attention to the latest data on micronutrients, how important omega-3 fatty acids are, how important vitamin D, B12 is, and so modifying their diet, making sure that they eat certain things more than not, and also supplementing. We supplement with vitamin B12. And we did supplement them with the omega-3 fatty acids, just based on the information that the brain uses a whole lot of fat when it's growing, especially during the first 5 years of life. And thankfully, when you have 2 neurologists as parents, I guess it can be a curse in many ways. But I'm really proud of them, and they're thriving. They're doing well. I boast about them, but not because I'm their parent. I really don't feel like I'm their parent. I'm just their guardians. They're their own individuals, but they're both in college. They're 15 and 13. They both aced the SAT when they were 10 years old. And I think that's a good testament for a plant-based diet being one of the most amazing ways to live for their health, for their brain health, for the environment. And they're doing amazing things, and I can't wait for them to put forth incredible information for everyone. So thank you for bringing them up.
Oh, you're more than welcome. I have 2 really quick ones.
Yeah.
One of our members asked, what does a typical day in the life of the Sherzai look like?
Oh.
With 2 young, should we do pre-COVID? COVID is a totally different world. So what did it look like, say, in 2019?
Well, that's not a quick question, is it? But here, I'll make it quick. When you have a purpose in life, it's a beautiful life no matter what.
Yeah.
When you know what your purpose in life is, when you're here to serve others, when you're here to make a difference about the environment, about health, about animals, it's a beautiful life. And so you wake up early, you eat the best food, you exercise, nothing seems like a chore, everything is joy. Of course, there are times when we're yelling and shouting at each other in the car, like, where's my notebook? Or why didn't you not do this on time? That happens, teenage kids. But I'm privileged and blessed to have a purpose in life, and everything else is icing on cake.
Definitely. It's the majority of a selfless life, I think. But anyways, our last really quick question is, what would you say if you had only one brain boosting food to eat? What would it be?
That is my least favorite question.
Oh, you've had it before.
One brain boosting food that one should eat every single day? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it said, what would you say if you only had one brain boosting food? If you say you were on a desert island and you could only have one brain boosting food, what would that one be?
Okay. Well, in the book, we actually talk about the Neuro-9. I'm kind of scared of these acronyms, but they're very helpful. There are 9 foods that are incredibly important that you need to add every single day. Let's see if I can remember them, if this is a testament of how I eat and how I live. Greens, any dark green leafy vegetable, that's on top. Berries, blueberries or blackberries or strawberries. Beans or lentils. Nuts like walnuts. Seeds, chia seeds and flax seeds, that's 5. Come on, Ayesha. Herbs and spices like turmeric, oregano, parsley, rosemary. Cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower. Whole grains, oatmeal, my favorite, quinoa, brown rice. Quinoa is a pseudo seed, some might say, but we'll take it as a whole grain. And then the 9th one was tea. So green tea or black tea. So just pick any one of them when you're going on an island. But yeah, those are the Neuro-9.
So thank you so very much.
Really embarrassing, but no.
All right. I'm going to turn it back over to AJ to wrap it up.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation, and thank you, Judy, for a great Q&A.
You're welcome.
I would like to thank both of you, but Dean couldn't make it, but I understand his situation.
He just walked in, and he'd like to say hello.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
I'm so sorry. I had an emergency in the hospital. I had to, but you saw that you got the better half anyway. And that, people say that, but in this case, it's absolutely true. If you had me do the Neuro-9, I would probably forget 8 of them. So.
Well, you were busy. That's why.
Yeah, no. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me and us. It's been a pleasure being connected with you, and we hope we can see you again. And much love to our friend Howard, Leslie, and Karen, and you, Judy, AJ. Thank you. Thank you all.
I mean, we appreciate all that you do, and for sure, we're looking forward to your visit back with us here in Sun City, Hilton Head. And one of the things that I really, really want to point out is it's amazing that we selected you to kick off this new year with. And, here it is, 2021. And my resolution right now is it's a new year and we need to have a new you. And part of that is getting me really energized to make those changes in my life that I need to. I don't have so much of a problem on the nutrition side because I've been with the club a number of years, but it's those other things that I really need to work on. And I will definitely be using your app that you have that's out there available. I've already took the quiz on it, and I'm doing well, better than I expected. But thank you so much. And to our listeners that are out there, often we kick off our meetings and we ask them, where do you want to be in 10 years from now? And with the information that we receive, and gradually by implementing what you tell us that we need to be doing, that dream is to live a life to the fullest and healthfully. And they can do that if they just follow what you're telling us. So thanks for being with us this evening. We hope to see you again. And with that, thank you for joining us tonight, everybody. A link with this video will be available after the release of the book, which will be after the 23rd of March. Good night, everybody.
Bye. Thank you so much. Have a great night. Thank you.
All right.